Today's episode is sponsored by Squarespace. If you want to try building your own website on Squarespace to see what their powerful platform can do for your business, check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And if you like it and you want to launch that site you just built during that trial, go to squarespace.com/filmroom to save 10% on your first purchase. There's something poetic about Tua Tagovailoa finally becoming a Miami Dolphin. 14 years after a crazy 2006 offseason where then Miami head coach Nick Saban walked away from a different, short, injured, but still talented young quarterback named Drew Brees, an older and now wiser Saban at Alabama recently gave his former team a very pointed warning: do not make his mistake again. On the surface, there were a lot of similarities between the decisions the Dolphins had to make with 22-year-old Tagovailoa this year and the 27-year-old Brees that once tried to make Miami his home. Both of them are not exactly physically imposing human beings after all. Both of them also have okay but not great arms, and both of them were coming off of fairly major injuries that doctors couldn't 100% guarantee their recovery from. Honestly, the comparisons were almost too easy. But even with all of that narrative resemblance, I think that the Dolphins ultimately learned their lesson from Brees and put aside their concerns about Tua's injuries because he shares an even more uncanny likeness to Brees in the one thing that matters most: how he plays quarterback. When you watch Tua on the field, it's really striking how much he looks just like a left-handed version of Drew. They both have incredibly quick feet, their mechanics are refined and purposeful, and both of them almost seem to be more comfortable with a pocket collapsing around them rather than just running around in space and playing backyard football. When both of them are under center, their offenses turn into well-oiled machines rather than high-flying circus acts like some other notable QBs. And at least to me, that cold, almost suffocating efficiency is really their main selling point. And before you dig at me for that, I know some of you are watching this and saying, Brett, you just described the dreaded system quarterback label. Why would that make me like Tua over someone like Justin Herbert or Jordan Love, who are far more physically talented? And you're right. Tua Tagovailoa was an athletically limited system quarterback at Alabama, just like Drew Brees was and is a system quarterback in Sean Payton's West Coast offense. I'm not denying that at all. But the thing is, to me, being a system quarterback is not really a bad thing. I don't hate that label because by definition, you know that a system QB can execute your system and keep the team on schedule more often than not. And not only that, just because a guy like Brees or Tua is at his most comfortable in a certain offense, that doesn't mean that they themselves don't also elevate those systems far above what they otherwise would be with someone else under center. That distinction right there is what really makes the difference. It's not just that the systems themselves raise the floors of Tua and Drew, because of course they would, it's that Tua and Drew can then stand on those high floors that are given to them and raise the overall ceiling of the team on top of it. That's the transformation from a system quarterback to a system quarterback that's also a franchise quarterback. Trust me, they aren't the same thing, but Tua, just like Brees, is both. The main knock that you typically see on Tagovailoa is that Alabama's offense was very play-action and RPO heavy. Roughly 46.2% of all of Tua's throws were off of either traditional play-action or in run-pass option plays, which far exceeds the NFL average of about 30%. For reference, Carson Wentz last year was at about 30.3% of his passes coming out of those concepts, and the Eagles ran RPOs more than just about anyone else. So that's a good illustration of just how much Bama relied on them compared to most actual NFL teams. But even with all of that, Tua's average depth of target of 8.8 yards was still top 6 in the country, and that would have also been tied at 9th in the NFL last season with reigning MVP Lamar Jackson. So overall, that means that despite throwing more RPOs than basically anybody else in the sport at any level, Tua was still not afraid to push the ball down the field very aggressively and very often, and for the most part, he was extremely accurate when he did take those shots down the field. Remember that per our favorite statistics site on this channel, Sports Info Solutions, Tua's on-target accuracy percentage on down-the-field throws, meaning how accurate he was on attempts that traveled 20 or more yards in the air, he threw catchable passes on 64.9% of them. That was 8th in all of college football last year. Even Drew Brees himself was only at about 55.2% for 2019, and when looking at Drew's last 5 seasons combined, he's sitting even lower than that at 50% on the dot. Plus, believe it or not, throughout all of his years in New Orleans, going back to 2006, despite all of the great offenses they've had, Brees has only exceeded Tua's average depth of target once during his career back in 2012 when he had an average target of 9 yards. So, at least statistically speaking, Tua is on average more aggressive and more accurate on those aggressive throws than one of the most efficient and accurate quarterbacks in NFL history. To me, as long as we're just box score scouting and throwing out numbers and lazy takes about how Tua's only good at play action and RPOs, we might as well acknowledge those other numbers too that show just how bullshit that narrative is. I mean, hell, even looking at just Tua's throws that don't use play action, he still had the highest passer rating in the nation, even higher than Joe Burrow. The system may have given Tua a favorable structure for his talents to shine in, nobody's denying that, but for God's sake, the guy then turned around and elevated that same system and the talent around him to levels that some of us didn't even think were possible. Just like I said when I broke down Joe Burrow last month, I don't evaluate QBs based on what happens when everything is going right. When protection is good, when windows are wide open, when the play calls are perfect, those ideal circumstances don't impress me because the system and the surrounding talent are generally responsible for establishing that floor. But what Tagovailoa can do when things go wrong, when that same system or the same talent don't back him up, that's what determines how high his ceiling can be. That is the evaluation that really counts. Take this 3rd and 8 against Ole Miss as an example. Bama is running a sail concept here from 4 wide against what seems to be a man coverage look from Ole Miss before the snap, but if you look closely, you can see Jerry Jeudy calling out the DB guarding him is coming on a blitz. Now, oftentimes, if the number 3 receiver inside reads a corner blitz that will overload the protection scheme or not be blocked, he would likely become what's called the hot receiver on the play and change his route to something quick, like a glance route or a speed out that the quarterback could hit him on before the free rusher got there. That's called throwing hot, and it's a great way to beat pressures that overload your called protection. But if that blitzing DB is instead rushing into what's called a slide protection that has the numbers available to pick him up, Jeudy would then no longer be a hot receiver that needs to get open quickly because his man is theoretically getting blocked up by that protection scheme, and Jeudy can then just keep running his original route deeper down the field. In this case, it's a corner route in that sail concept. So I guess a simple way of saying it is that sometimes a protection scheme can actually change a receiver's route in the middle of a play, or not change it at all depending on who's actually bringing the pressure. And I say all that because even though Jeudy was pointing out the blitz here, he wasn't actually pointing it out to Tua, he was pointing it out to the left tackle, Alex Leatherwood, because Bama was in a half slide protection to the left where the tackle needed to be alert for that cornerback to come off the edge. Jeudy is not and cannot be a hot receiver on this play because the protection is sliding to his side. That's the rule, and that miscommunication on the rule is why everything went wrong. Leatherwood did not hear Jeudy call out the pressure, so he never slid all the way out to pick it up, and Jeudy was still running a corner route instead of a hot route that could get open quickly because he thought Leatherwood was going to pick it up. So that is how we ended up right here. A free rusher off the edge, Tua becoming a sitting duck in the backfield, and Jeudy's still not quite open enough yet to help him out. This exact moment is what separates guys who can play in a system from those who can elevate a system, and naturally Tua once again proved that he's the latter. Watch him recognize the rusher coming right at him, jab with his left foot while giving a hard shoulder fake, only to then cross back over to his right, tuck the ball away to protect it, and escape out to open space where he could find Jeudy running wide open well past the sticks. I mean, the DB had him dead to rights here, and a lot of other quarterbacks would have just gotten the ball out to Waddle and hope for the best, or just tucked it and taken a big sack. But Tua knew that there was only one way to actually reliably move the chains here, and that was to avoid the pressure all by himself and find a receiver deep down the field when he broke that pressure. That kind of awareness and poise is what makes him special. And we see these kinds of pocket skills and eye discipline while under pressure every single week. If there's one defining trait he shares with Drew Brees, it's their ability to navigate pressure within the pocket, keep their composure and their eyes down the field, and punish pressure by attacking behind it. By no means was Tua quite as ridiculous under pressure as Joe Burrow, because honestly nobody is, but he still had a passer rating under pressure of 115.5, which is extremely high and the 3rd highest overall in this draft class. Truth be told, there's not really a whole lot wrong with Tua on his resume. He's smart, he's poised, he's refined, he's conservative when he needs to be, and aggressive when he can be. He's mobile enough within the pocket, even if he's not very mobile out of the pocket. He's a phenomenal leader and will be the heart and soul of whatever locker room you drop him into. There's just a lot to love there, and very few negatives to boot. On the field, at least, the only real glaring problem that I have with him is that his arm just isn't that good, which I think everybody knew already. In fact, I'd venture to say that his velocity is on the lower end of starting NFL quarterbacks. And even though his average depth of target was relatively high the last 2 years, he only attempted a handful of 50-plus yard passes throughout his entire college career because he just didn't have the juice to get it there. And believe me, that will still likely limit the kinds of throws he can make at the next level. I distinctly remember one throw in the Tennessee game last year where he had both Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs running free against a broken coverage, and for most NFL quarterbacks worth their salt, if you give them a guy with Henry Ruggs' speed running that wide open, it's an automatic touchdown. But with Tua's limited arm talent, he put damn near everything he had into that ball, and it still barely went 50 yards in the air. And Ruggs had to slow down so much to get it that he got tackled inside the 15 instead of easily scoring. And I get it, sure, a 50-yard gain is a 50-yard gain, but in the NFL, those gimme plays really have to be turned into touchdowns because NFL defenses will not just give them to you that often. And if Tua couldn't convert that free opportunity against Tennessee on Saturdays, he for damn sure probably won't do it against the Patriots or the Bills on Sundays either. Again, it's not that big of a deal to me that he can't make that throw because Tua is so good at almost everything else, but I can't point out all the good in this show without at least showing some of the bad too. It's only fair after all. Contrary to what some people think, Tua is not a perfect prospect, or even an elite prospect if we're being honest with ourselves, but he's still a pretty damn good one if you put him in the right situation, and that's fine with me. We all get so caught up in labels like high floor, low ceiling, game manager, or system quarterback, but most of the time, all those labels don't actually mean anything. Just because a quarterback has clear limitations, and just because he has a certain system or philosophy that he thrives in, that doesn't mean that he still can't win a lot of football games and change the fortunes of a franchise. Sean Payton figured that out and transformed the Saints almost overnight back in 2006, and after learning from that experience, Nick Saban was practically begging the Finns a few months ago to not repeat their past mistakes. If you really pay attention, some of the best quarterbacks this game has ever seen were all system quarterbacks. They all had a comfort zone, they all stuck to that comfort zone religiously, they played as smart and efficiently as possible, and they almost never committed dumb turnovers. Tua may be the least talented quarterback out of all the young guns in his division, but he also might be the best of them when it's all said and done because he's a perfect fit for what offensive coordinator Chan Gailey likes to do. Get the ball out quick, run the offense with a high tempo, and make defenses bleed to death with 1,000 little paper cuts. It's a perfect systemic match, and I couldn't imagine a more suitable situation for both the coaching staff and the players. I can promise you this, even though Tua may never be considered a top 5 talent at his position, there's going to be a point someday where people come to the same realization about him and Chan Gailey that they already came to a long time ago about Brees and Payton. The system quarterback label doesn't matter, because if the quarterback is good enough, one way or another, they are the system. Thank you for watching this week's episode, and thank you to our sponsor for the week, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform for building an amazing online presence for your business or portfolio. Every one of their dozens of templates supports all major forms of content, including pages, galleries, blogs, merch shops, event calendars, and more. Plus, beyond just configuring third-party domains, you can even use Squarespace to purchase domains directly. Over 200 different types of domains are available, and each domain comes with a parking page and free Whois privacy. I myself am currently in the process of building a new website for the channel because I wanted to keep my podcast, YouTube videos, business contact information, and a future merchandise store all in one place. Check out my new logo that I'm going to be using, by the way. I think it's pretty nice. And I'm using Squarespace to build that all-inclusive website as we speak. expect that to launch sometime in the next week or two once I get all my ducks in a row, obviously. If you want to try building your own website on Squarespace to see what their powerful platform can do for your business, check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And if you like it and you want to launch that site you just built during that trial, go to squarespace.com/filmroom to save 10% on your first purchase of a website or domain. Again, thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's show. And as for me and channel news, I'll have another Film Room coming out probably this coming weekend on Saturday or Sunday. Not sure which yet, or even what the topic is, but it's coming. I also released my AFC East draft recap last week on the podcast, and I'll be dropping the NFC East and I think the AFC South this week as well. Not 100% sure, but I think that's the one. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, go follow me on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. I'm going to go get to work on that extra film room, and I'll see you back here in a few days. So until then, later.